Hey everybody, it is Todd here. Thank you for tuning in. Man, 2020 has been a kick in the pants. This is crazy. And I debated a very long time before I finally decided to put out a video because quite frankly, I hate talking about politics. I absolutely hate it. And when I started getting on YouTube, the two things that I never wanted to talk about was race and politics. And the climate of 2020, that's all anyone seems to be thinking about right now because of everything that's going on. So let me preface this by saying I am not a Democrat and I am not a Republican. I am an American. And I think that the two-party system is deeply, deeply flawed. And I think that too many people are loyal to a party instead of actually looking at policy, what's going to contribute to your life and make it better. So I have some thoughts, and I'm just one man with an opinion, so you can agree or disagree. I don't expect to change anyone's mind. As a lot of people, their mind is made up, and that's a big part of their identity. And it's always difficult to talk about things like this because you risk angering anyone. And since I am right in the middle of Democrat and Republican, I'll probably piss off everybody. I watched the horrific death of George Floyd, just like everybody around the country and people around the world did. And most people would agree that that was murder. The police officer had his knee on his neck for 8.5 minutes while he suffocated and until he died. I am from a fighting background. I've done boxing and mixed martial arts. And let me tell you right now, if you were in a fight or training or anything like that and you knee on someone's neck, you're booted out of the gym. Like anyone with any sort of formal training, you know not to do that because you can kill someone. I've seen men escorted out of the MMA gym for using maneuvers that were a little bit less harmful than what that police officer did. And combine it with the fact that he was in handcuffs, it just makes it pretty clear what was going on. But before anyone who's watching that may be conservative or Republican gets fed up with this narrative that, police are bad and other people are victims, I do want to talk about the protests and the good and the bad that will come of it. So first off, I'm all for people protesting. Even if you're protesting something that I disagree with, it is your right to protest. We have freedom of speech in this country, and thank God we do. So your right to protest, I'm all about it. I think the looting is problematic, and not for the reason that a lot of you think, and it is for that reason. So businesses, don't deserve to be broken into and burned down and looted. But more than that, I think for me and for the cause, like if the cause is to treat people of color better, I don't think this is going to help the cause. And here's why. I know that racism exists, and I'm not going to play the victim card here. I've actually never, ever once used the black card. The only black card that I'm interested in is the one with no spending limit and it says Visa on it. I am not interested in race baiting anyone, but racism does exist. And I know that when some people see me or someone who looks like me, they assume that I'm violent. They assume that I'm dangerous. Sometimes they assume that I'm ignorant just because of the way I look. And when people are burning down businesses and stealing jewelry and shooting retired police officers so they can get their hands on a couple of TVs, all that is doing is reaffirming whatever bias that people had before. I have walked down a sidewalk before, and I'm sure other black men have experienced this, where I'm walking down a sidewalk and there is a white woman walking towards me, so we're walking towards each other. And at some point, before we pass each other, she crosses the street and decides to walk on the other sidewalk. Why? Maybe it's because she's racist. Maybe she is, I don't know. But whether she is or she's not, one thing is clear, she's terrified of me. She's scared of me. And I know that. And it's very clear. I mean, And so whether you want to chalk it up to racism or, what have you, that is a thing in this country where people are going to assume certain things. And I think that when the protests turned violent and the looting started, it's going to be really bad for the cause. And I'm not mixing the protests and the looters in the same category. I really do think there are separate groups of people. There's also some evidence to show that maybe some folks from the other side actually was breaking some of the businesses to kind of like point the finger at Black Lives Matter. There is a little bit of evidence on that, but there was also looting done by protesters that then turned violent, or people that didn't even go there to protest. They went there to take advantage of the hysteria and of the chaos. But we saw this happen in Central Park with, I guess everyone's calling her Karen, about the woman who looked at a black man who asked her to put her leash on her dog. And I wasn't there, obviously. I wasn't in Central Park that day, but from the video, I don't gather that she actually felt that her life was in danger. I don't, and I wasn't there, so I can't prove or disprove it, but it seems to me that she didn't feel like her life was in danger. But what she said, the threat she made was, I'm going to call 911 and tell them that there's an African American man threatening my life. That speaks volumes to how she understands that she can use a man's blackness as a weapon against him. But, and this is going to be devastating to a lot of people that are watching right now, the inconvenient truth that is heartbreaking is that black men make up 6% of the population in the United States and about 44% of the violent crimes. That is a heartbreaking and very inconvenient truth to know. This woman, I believe she knows what she was doing. And I don't believe that she felt that her life was threatened. And the people that very quickly said, oh, you're a racist. And I'm not saying she's not, I don't know her, but was she taking advantage of the fact that the relationship with law enforcement and with the black community is rocky, in part because of racism and the history of racism and how systemic it is, and also because of the horrific crime rates. I mean, it's really, really bad. If you look up crime statistics in Chicago, it's awful. And I'm not even one to use the term black on black crime or white on white crime because, quite frankly, communities are still pretty separate. So if you're murdered, you're likely to get murdered by someone who looks like you. White people kill other white people all the time. Black people kill other black people. Hispanic people kill other Hispanic people. Asian people kill other Asian people, and Native American people kill other Native American people. Our communities are separate. So if you're going to get murdered, you're probably going to get murdered who's someone at the same race. But when you have statistics like that show that black men, and I'm one of them, make up 6% of the population and 44% of the homicides, I think that it can dilute the Black Lives Matter movement. So real quick, speaking on Black Lives Matter, I want to talk to the folks that don't really understand it and would respond with all lives matter. So first, let me just say, of course, all lives matter. Anyone with a modicum of common sense and decency would agree that every human life has value. We all matter. The Black Lives Matter movement, what that was doing was it was looking at how black people are disproportionately affected by police brutality. And it was basically looking at something like George Floyd, where if a police officer can kneel on a man's neck, cutting off the blood flow to his brain, making it so he can't breathe until he dies, the implication is that black lives don't matter. So that's why they said Black Lives Matter, is because of the number of unarmed black men who have been killed by police officers. The number itself, I will admit, actually isn't staggeringly different than the number of white men. And the data is quite clear on that. I think in 2019, there were 9 unarmed black men who were killed by police, and there were 13 unarmed white men who were killed by police. The difference is that black men make up 6% of the population, where white men make up a lot more of the population. So the number should be different. But anyway, that's getting into the numbers about it. The Black Lives Matter is basically saying, like, what we see is that our lives don't matter. When Kaepernick takes a knee to protest police brutality and the president calls him a son of a bitch and disrespectful, when he's talking about something that's real in these communities, that's telling us that our lives don't matter. It would be like let's say you were in a horrible accident and you lost one finger, and you go to the emergency room and you have like a finger and you have the ice and you're like, hey, attach my finger. This is really important that you put this finger on. And the doctor says, well, all fingers are important. It's like, well, yes, all fingers are important, but right now we're talking about the one that's detached from the hand. Can we please focus on this one right now? We're not saying that the other ones don't matter. We're saying that this one needs attention at this moment. I think where Black Lives Matter loses people, and they've already lost people that are on the far alt-right. Like, I'm not speaking to those people. I'm speaking to people in the middle. Where Black Lives Matter loses people is in incidents like David Dorn, who is the off-duty, or I guess retired sheriff, black man, who was shot and killed by looters so they could get a TV. And so the thought is, well, where is Black Lives Matter then? Black Lives Matter seems to only come out when it's a white person killing a black person. I think that's where Black Lives Matter loses people. There's a lot of outrage and protests and riots when a man of a certain race will kill a man of a different race, and then nobody seems to care when you're killing your own people. I think that's where Black Lives Matter loses folks. But I think, the people who called Colin Kaepernick disrespectful for taking a knee probably would have also called Rosa Parks disrespectful for not giving up her bus seat. And that's the reality of it. And for those of you who think that Kaepernick was disrespecting the flag or the military, that's not what he was doing. He was using his platform to draw attention to police brutality, and he was fired for it. I mean, no other team would work with him. No other team would pick him up. And I think the difference is when you have a man like Kaepernick who protests about what's going on in his community, and you have people calling him disrespectful, disrespecting the flag. I mean, people called him treasonous. They said that that's treason. And yet those people also have no issue with the Confederate flag, which actually is the symbol of treason in this country. I mean, that flag is representative of the other side during the Civil War. I mean, if anything would spark treason, I would think it's waving around the flag that actually represented the Civil War and, when this country was at its most divided point, that we went to war with each other. And so the folks that call Kaepernick disrespectful and treasonous, but also sport a Confederate flag, it's just ludicrous to me. And I think a lot of people were upset at the President Donald Trump when, there was a bunch of armed Caucasian men with their AR-15s, and they were basically protesting that they needed a haircut. And the president tweeted that, hey, these people are good people, make a deal with them. And then when the protests about police brutality, it was, here are some thugs. When the looting starts, the shooting starts. And again, I'll be the first to admit, I don't think looting is a good thing. It's problematic, and it's a crime, and it's dangerous, and it does nothing to benefit the cause. But it's very telling where you can have a group of people with semi-automatic weapons, and they're good people. And then you have folks that are really angry about how their communities are treated, and they're protesting, and they're thugs. And this is not an anti-gun video, by the way. I have a concealed carry permit. In fact, I have a special license that allows me to carry pretty much everywhere except for New York City and Hawaii. So I'm not anti-gun. I'm very pro Second Amendment. I actually think that the far left, who want to abolish the police and ban all guns, is absolutely ludicrous. Because what's going to happen if you've taken every legal gun owner's gun away and you've abolished the police, and then somebody breaks into your house? Well, you can't call 911 if there are no police. And if all the good people have given their guns away, then you can't protect yourself. And that burglar who broke into your house, they don't give a crap about gun laws. Criminals will still find a way to get their hands on a weapon. So I think that is ludicrous, and that's where the left loses people. And that's why at the beginning of this video I mentioned I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I am American. I look at what I think is best for the country, what's best for the people, and that's why a lot of what I say is controversial, because it's not one size fits all. I'm not loyal to any specific party. And I know Candace Owens just put out a video about George Floyd. She's also mentioned several times that she doesn't believe that racism existed before Obama, and that's insane. I mean, you can't to blame all of racism on Obama is insane. And Candace Owens, she's very eloquent, she's very passionate, she's clearly educated, but when she says some stuff that she's never experienced racism, first of all, I know it's not true because she sued her high school for racial discrimination. And you can look this up. By the way, for anyone who doesn't know, Candace Owens is a black conservative who's pretty much a talking head for the right, who speaks a lot about how black issues aren't real and how they're, it's not the real problem. And she has some good points about, the black community and the culture. And I agree with some of the things she said, but the video that she just put out, saying that she blames racism on Obama is insane, and saying that she's never dealt with racism before it's flat out not true, because she sued her high school. I think the NAACP helped her win like 35 grand, and you can all look that up as public record. And to my conservative friends that don't believe racism exists, it does exist. I don't think it's the biggest problem that the world faces today. I think there are other problems like a global water shortage and extreme poverty and other things, but racism absolutely exists. And I don't think statistics will help people understand that. So I think stories do a better job, personal stories, because statistics get lost in the numbers. The first time that I was called a nigger was when I was 6 years old. And it was by a middle-aged white man who didn't want his son to play with me because of the color of my skin. That happened. I'm from a very small hick town. People have been calling them yeehaw towns now. And I experienced a lot of racism. And so I left as soon as I could. And I was pretty confused growing up, because a lot of the folks that were pretty openly racist were also huge fans of football, which is 68% black. And I was so confused on how can you hate black people and yet you love the sport that's dominated by black men. And they would cheer when a black man on their team scored a touchdown. I was very confused. And again, people that were openly racist were fans of comedians like Chris Rock. And, they were fans of Will Smith movies. And so I got this idea that, okay, so black people are hated unless they're rich and famous. And so that was my goal. For a long time, I just focused on, okay, how do I get rich? How do I get people to know my name? And the crazy thing is, against all odds, I did it. I became a millionaire when I was 25. And 2 years later, I was interviewed by CNBC, and it went viral, and it got millions and millions of hits. And it was incredible. It was like I had all this money, millions of people knew my name. Like it was just this level that I've been thinking about since I was a kid. But still, the climate today is, Kaepernick is a rich black person and many people hate him. And LeBron James is a rich black person and many people hate him too. And it's because they're speaking out on things that are going on. Now, another thing that I've noticed is a lot of conservatives are showing pictures of Dr. Martin Luther King and propping him up as a hero. And then they're looking at the protesters today and calling them, hood rats, thugs, and criminals. And they're using cute memes that say, they show a picture of Dr. King and they say, this is a protest. And then they show pictures of the George Floyd protests and they say, this is a crime. But I would ask you, anyone who has that narrative, to remember that Dr. King was one of the most hated men when he was alive. He was one of the most hated men in America, and he was assassinated for it. And so it's really easy to look back and see that and say, yeah, this person was heroic when the people on the side that would probably agree with you that, the protesters are disrespectful are also the people that didn't like Martin Luther King. But I do think that there are a lot of problems facing the Black community that have less to do with race and more to do with culture. And this, folks, is probably where I'm going to lose my friends on the left. 75% of Black households are single mothers. And if you look at the statistics, if you look at the studies, a girl who is raised without a father is 3 times more likely to become pregnant as a teenager. And a boy who is raised without a father is 20 times more likely to wind up in jail or prison. So what you have in these communities are girls that are getting pregnant when they're teenagers, and the boys who are getting them pregnant are going to jail, repeating the cycle so that girl is raising children by herself. That's a problem. And it's not as easy just to say, well, it's like that because of racism. I hate identity politics. I hate the idea that all Black people should think and vote a certain way, or that all Mexican people or all Asian people or all white people should agree on certain things and do it one way, because we're all individuals and we all have individual choices. There are many problems facing the Black community that contributes to the poverty and the disadvantages that are there. And of course, racism exists, and systemically, there was Jim Crow, there was redlining, which for anyone that doesn't know is redlining was basically banks who were lending out money for houses took out maps and they drew red boxes around Black communities, basically saying, we're not going to lend money to those communities because they're not good investment opportunities. And so a lot of Black people, because of redlining, couldn't actually buy a house. So where if you're Caucasian, your grandparents may have had the opportunity to buy a house. And if you're Black, your grandparents probably didn't have the opportunity to buy a house. And so there's not a whole lot of generational wealth that was passed down from Black people. And although some of those effects are still in today, I do think that the community, we need to do better though. People can choose a different life. And I'm someone who grew up without a lot of resources, and I pulled myself out. And granted, I wasn't from the hood. I was from in fact, a white hick town. That's where I grew up. But to say that we can't make our own decision, we still have to play our own game. Some people were dealt a really bad hand, a really, really bad hand. And some people right out of the gate have a royal flush. If you are attractive, and your parents are billionaires, and you're male, and you're heterosexual, you have a lot of things going for you. You have an easier hand. Now, you still have to play your game, and I have to play my game, and you watching, you have to play your game. So we all have to play the hand we're dealt. I think when it comes to things like identity politics and affirmative action, saying that, you require someone on the leadership team to be female, or you require someone on the leadership team to be gay or Black or Mexican. I don't think that actually is what Martin Luther King wanted. I think that you should hire the best people for the job. And if the best person happens to be Black or female or Asian, Hispanic, Native American, transgender, gay, straight, bi, whatever it is, then put them in that position. But as soon as you start making race and gender a prerequisite for a job, then make no mistake about it. You're using racism and sexism, and it might be, to get disadvantaged people on board, but let's be clear. You're requiring that someone is a certain race and a certain gender to get a position, and I don't think that's right. I think that the real way change will happen, if that's the goal, if change is the goal, it's not for some super woke company to put a Black man on their board. It's let's invest in those communities that are disadvantaged. Think about it. In those communities that are poor and disadvantaged, if we took out the liquor store and we put in a Whole Foods, if we removed the strip club and we put in a couple of libraries, if we invested money into preschool and elementary school and made their school systems better all the way up through high school, then they have a winning shot at going to university. And then instead of a woke company being, patting themselves on the back because they hired a Black guy as their VP of operations or whatever, what you'll have is a lot of black people and Mexican people and people of color, let's just say people of color, will be qualified for that position because their school system will be better. That's what's really going to make a change. Not, you're super woke because you have a female CEO, or you're super woke because you have a person of color on the board. Like, let's make it so those people have the same opportunity. And I believe that equal opportunity is the best thing. And actually, anyone with any sense agrees that too. Anyone with any sense agrees that people should have equality of opportunity, because that's the only system that allows everyone to contribute their talents to produce a better society. I mean, if you say that, well, we're not going to let women work or whatever, or we're not going to let black people do this, it's like, well, then you're missing out on this huge talent pool of people who could be bettering the marketplace. So equality of opportunity not only is the right thing to do, it's essential for the best possible economy that we can have. Where you're going to get people up in arms is if you demand equality of outcome, because talent isn't equal and effort isn't equal. And some people are just harder working and smarter. And so you're never going to have equality of outcome, but we should strive for equality of opportunity. And by the way, this is the reason why there will never be wealth equality too. I know a lot of people, particularly liberals on the far left, who think socialism is a good idea. There will never be wealth equality, never ever, because people make different decisions. So even if, let's say you took all the money in the world, all the money, and you distributed it evenly amongst everyone, in 7 years, many people would be bankrupt. And also a few people will have doubled their money or more. And that's because people make different decisions when it comes to how they spend and how they invest. I have clients that make $100,000 a year and they save $30,000 a year. And I have had another client that makes $800,000 a year and spends $900,000 a year. So he's negative $100,000 a year. So wealth equality will never happen because people make different choices and they spend their money differently. They don't invest the same. It'll never happen. But I think, and this is why I'm in the middle of Democrat and Republican, because I think we can all agree, hey, let's not have police brutality. Let's not have that. And if we're going to, I don't think abolishing police is the right move, but there's been some talk about defunding the police. But if you're going to do that, then reroute those funds to actually training police and maybe even having a program in community college where criminal justice is a free program at community college where you go there for 2 years, you get that certificate, and that's when you can be a police officer. Because right now, believe it or not, it takes more training, more hours of leading up to it to actually be a masseuse than it does to be a police officer. The training for becoming a massage therapist, it's longer than police academy. So if that tells you anything, that maybe we do need a reform. And maybe if we do defund the police department, it needs to go specifically to a criminal justice program where you go for 2 years, because if it takes longer to become a masseuse than it does to become a police officer, and yet a police officer can use force, they have handcuffs and tasers and guns and batons, I mean, that is a wild system. And I think we can agree on stuff like that and also recognize that a gun ban probably won't do any good, because out of 36,000 gun deaths per year, 22,000 of them are suicide. So your chances of actually being murdered with a gun are very low. You're more likely, if you die at the hands of a gun, statistically speaking, it's all likelihood that you pulled the trigger, because more gun deaths are suicide than anything else. So instead of talking about banning guns, let's talk about mental health. And let's talk about how people can actually, if they're sick, how they can get the treatment that they need. By the way, solving the mental health problem will probably also solve the homeless problem. It'll at least put a big dent in it. And I don't know where you live, I don't know where you're watching this, but in the state that I'm from, in the city that I'm from, Seattle, most of the homeless people in my city are either whacked out on drugs or they're mentally ill, severely mentally ill. So if we can solve the mental health problem, we will have less gun violence, less suicides, and less homelessness. And people on the far right, don't necessarily want to help any of those people. And people on the far left just want to give folks free houses and take everyone's guns away. And it's just like, why do we have to do one or the other? Why can't we find some middle ground and do what makes sense? Going back to the problems facing the Black community, and this is another one where I'm probably going to lose some friends for this. It's going to be very controversial. First of all, let me say this. My favorite type of music is hip hop and rap. I love all music. There's not really a type of music that I dislike, but my go-to is hip hop. And culturally speaking, hip hop is mainstream culture, and it's become synonymous with Black culture, where, rock and roll isn't necessarily synonymous with white culture. Most rock stars are white, but you wouldn't just say that's white music, where with rap and hip hop, people might say that's Black music. I know of no other mainstream culture that constantly refers to their women as bitches and hoes. And again, I like rap. That's my go-to. That's what I listen to in the car. That's what I play all the time. It's my go-to. And I think what happens is other people hear that, and they don't just take it for entertainment value. They don't just take it as it's, entertainment. It makes the music juicier. They look at it as, that's Black culture, is Black men refer to Black women as bitches and hoes. And I think that creates this violent stereotype, or it at least contributes to the violent stereotype. I remember when I was a kid, I got an album from the rapper Chamillionaire, who came out with that song Ridin'. Everybody probably knows that song. And I had his CD, and there was a song on the CD called the Southern Takeover. And I'm going to botch the lyric. I'm not looking at anything. I don't have my computer in front of me, but if I remember correctly, and I will admit right now, you can go fact check this, you can look it up. But if I remember correctly, there's a lyric in the song Southern Takeover that says, "Send him to the casket, send him to the morgue, shot me a nigga cause I'm motherfucking bored." That's sung by a Black guy. And just imagine for a moment, there was a white singer with a song called The Southern Takeover. And they had that lyric, "Send him to the casket, send him to the morgue, shot me a nigga cause I'm motherfucking bored." There would be public outcry and outrage, and the world would fall apart. We would, and that singer would be destroyed. He would be canceled. And yet, it's perfectly normal when we do it. And I'm saying Black people. You might not be Black if you're watching this, but it's perfectly normal when people of the Black community do it. And I'm not even going to say if it's good or bad. I'm just saying I know of no other race to use their own racial slur and to brag about killing someone of their own race using that slur. Now, I understand the whole idea behind Black people using the N-word was to reappropriate the word. And I actually don't even use it. I don't use it ever. Even when I'm rapping in my car, when it's said, I skip that part. Maybe it's because I was raised by a white mother and I grew up in a white town. And culturally speaking, I was raised white. Let's be real. I was raised white, but I don't use that word. But it's just, if you look at other races and their pop culture, and it's which ones refer to their women as bitches and hoes, use their own racial slur, whether to greet each other or to insult each other, and brag about killing each other. You don't hear any other race doing that. So this all contributes to this stereotype that Black people are violent and dangerous and ignorant. And it's a terrible stereotype to belong to. So I think in my lifetime, I don't know that I have ever seen the nation more divided than I have today. And my experience is different, I will say, because I'm half Black, I'm half white, but let's be real, everyone probably sees me as Black because that's how I look. So I'm a Black person, but I'm also a rich person. So I have a different experience than many of my fellow brothers and sisters do. I'm not a policymaker. I can't say what needs to happen or not, but if I could leave the video at this, I think that in order to spark some real change, you got to invest in the communities. You got to get rid of the vices, and you got to put in healthy stuff. I went to the African American Museum of History in DC, and at the end of the museum, at the end of walking through, I was perplexed that in the cafeteria was the most unhealthy food. The worst food that you could possibly have was at this cafeteria after this museum. And it's like, man, let's get some healthy food in those communities. I had a drink where I could literally sift the sugar with my teeth. It was so bad. And so you have these poor communities that aren't eating right, and they're getting diabetes and heart disease and all these other things. And let's change the community. Let's invest there. Let's put in a Whole Foods and a PCC Natural Market and a couple of libraries, and let's get out the fast food and the liquor stores and the casinos. Let's start there. And then my friends who are on the conservative side, just recognize when you hear Black Lives Matter, they're not saying that white lives don't matter. That's not what they're saying. They're saying that right now, Black America is hurting disproportionately than other races when it comes to police brutality. So let's focus on that. That's what they're saying. We should not abolish the police, and we should not ban guns. Defunding the police and rerouting some of those resources to better training and education, a case could be made for that. When it comes to the gun ban, instead of banning guns, let's just do better mental health training, and there'll be less. Nobody who is sane does a mass shooting. Anyone who goes and shoots up a school, by definition, they're insane. So let's treat the mental health. Let's treat it at its core. We should have equality of opportunity, but we will never have equality of outcome. And I think the problem with the two-party system is both parties have agendas, and both parties deny fact when it suits them. People on the far right deny science when it comes to climate change, even though overwhelmingly, pretty much every scientist agree that climate change is happening. It is problematic. So let's figure out to what degree are humans contributing, and how do we stop it if stopping it is necessary. But people don't even want to talk about that. On the same side, folks on the far left completely deny science when it comes to biology. I saw my wife had a targeted ad on Instagram because we're thinking about starting a family soon. So we're looking up, cribs and, baby clothes and just all these things. We're not actively trying right now, but we're thinking about trying soon. So my wife got a targeted ad about pregnancy. And I only remember the first part of the ad. What I really remember is a comment after the ad. And the first part of the ad said, a woman's uterus. I don't remember anything other than that. I just remember a woman's uterus. And then my mind was blank because my eyes went to a comment, and the comment said, women aren't the only ones that have uteruses. Stop posting this transphobic propaganda, or something to that measure. And I think this is where, just like the far right will lose people by denying climate change, because that's happening. That climate change is a thing. The far left will lose people when they say that men have uteruses, because we don't. Men don't have uteruses. And it's there's two extremes. There's the far right, there's the far left, and they're both wrong. They're both wrong. And let's get right in here where it makes sense, and we can come together and we can agree on some things. Anyway, this video was a lot longer than I wanted it to be. I hope I didn't piss off anyone too much. Racism exists, sexism exists, homophobia exists, all of that stuff exists, but also, people can make decisions in their own community. People can better themselves, and we're all in it together. We're all here. We're all sharing this country. We're all sharing this planet. So let's just come together. Let's stop trying to divide people by race, class, gender. It's just, we're all one species. We're all humans. Let's just all treat each other with respect. Let's love each other. Let's take care of each other. We're all sharing this planet together, and let's do our best to be global citizens and just do the right thing and help each other out on a human level. All right, guys, we'll see you in the next video. Peace.